Dr. Brenda Page was a 32-year-old genetics scientist living in a ground-floor flat at 13 Allen Street in Aberdeen. It was there her blood-spattered body was found on Friday, 14th July 1978 by her 69-year-old neighbour, Elizabeth Gordon, sprawled out on her bed 12 hours after she'd died. She'd been savagely beaten to death, so badly so she was barely recognisable, and the police could find no motive for her killing. Dr. Page was well liked by her work colleagues at the University of Aberdeen, where she was the principal cytogeneticist, and her friends, who all spoke highly of her. She was intelligent, cheerful, easygoing and friendly. At 26, she'd married Dr. Christopher Kit Harrison, a biochemist 6 years her senior, at Ipswich on 6 May 1972. Initially they seemed very happy together, but soon the bickering and arguments started. 3 years later, the marriage failed and she moved out of the marital home at 12 Mile End Place, taking up residence in Allen Street. She did, however, return to the house, but only to feed her cats. 2 years later, she was granted her divorce in October 1977. The reason cited on the divorce papers prepared by her solicitor, Nicole Hosey, was her husband's unreasonable behaviour. Dr. Page even went so far as to take out an interdict on her ex-husband to stop him from calling her. Harrison's solicitor, David Burnside, disputed this, however, saying that despite the court ruling, they were on friendly terms. Days after her body was found, another side to this brilliant scientist was discovered by detectives, and her friends were astonished. For the previous 2 years, she'd been on the books of a commercial escort agency, Capital Escorts, that had bases in Edinburgh as well as Aberdeen, but using the name Brenda Adams, her mother's maiden name. She had spent her last few hours with 2 businessman clients, dining out in an Aberdeen hotel, the Treetops Hotel in Springfield Road. Both men were quickly eliminated from the inquiry, but police wanted to know what happened to her between 2:30 a.m. and the time she was discovered. Dr. Page and her husband had worked professionally together, but this too ended, and the climax to various incidents came when his research fellowship at the University of Aberdeen was not renewed, and the university authorities banned him from their premises. On Wednesday, 19th July, through Burnside, Harrison issued a statement saying he hoped that the perpetrator of his wife's murder would be caught soon. He went on to say Harrison wanted to state publicly the sincere and heartfelt grief he felt at the tragic and untimely death of his former wife. Burnside made it clear that Harrison had cooperated fully with the police in their ongoing investigation. Detective Chief Inspector James Ritchie of Grampian Police, who was leading the investigation, corroborated this statement. Ritchie believed the murder was spontaneous and not premeditated, and although it was possible more than one person was involved, he didn't think so. That same day, Dr. Page's mother, Florence Page, and her sister, Rita Ling, along with her husband, Peter Ling, visited the flat, having driven up from Ipswich. Also that day, a search involving 27 police officers took place in the Cove area as they searched various places, including gardens, waste ground, the rubbish tip and the foreshore for the murder weapon, and the attacker's blood-stained clothing. A photo fit of a man leaving the Allen Street tenement was issued. He'd been seen by a milkman just a few hours before Dr. Page's body was discovered, and a week later around 50 people came forward with information, but he wasn't concentrating alone on the man in Allen Street. The detective wanted people to come forward if they'd seen anyone in the street between 9:30 p.m. on the Thursday evening through to 6 o'clock on the Friday morning. Police also issued an image of a Mini Countryman and asked for people to come forward if they'd seen a similar dark green car in Allen Street, or indeed anywhere between Stonehaven and the city during that time. He appealed to taxi drivers, truck drivers, and early morning commuters. On the weekend of 22nd July, the police switched their hunt to Edinburgh, and a tracker dog was brought in to help in the investigation. Grampian police were looking for a green canvas duffel bag, so 2 officers headed to the capital to work with Lothian and Borders Police. They believed this bag could have contained the bloodied clothes and murder weapon, along with a watch and shoes belonging to the killer. Ritchie was of the view that if this bag was found, they would be in a strong position to make an arrest. Following the post-mortem, Ritchie made it public that Dr. Page may have scratched her assailant as she had fought for her life. There were signs of a struggle. On Thursday, 27th July, Brenda Page took her final journey. Her funeral took place at Rushmere St Andrew Parish Church in the Suffolk countryside, not far from Ipswich. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. On Wednesday, 2nd August, the River Dee near the King George VI Bridge was searched by police divers. They worked along a rope line between the first arch of the bridge and Riverside Drive, but found nothing. But by this time, they had a better description of the person of interest. He was between 5'5" and 5'8" tall, of stocky build, with dark, neat hair that was medium length and swept to one side. He had a moustache and was wearing slightly faded jeans and a dark jacket. Police also hoped a couple taking a taxi from the Treetops Hotel between 12:30 and 1 in the morning of 14th July would come forward. A year after the killing, and little progress made, a photo fit was reissued of the man the police were interested in, and the Mini. The police had hit a dead end, but remained optimistic that one day her killer would be caught, as they believed she knew her killer. By this time, they had also pieced together Dr. Page's movements that fateful evening. She had left the lab at the university at 6 o'clock and returned home, when she received a phone call from the Edinburgh-based escort agency. She'd had dinner with the 2 businessmen, then left Treetops alone at 2:30 and drove home in her own Mini. With no more leads, Grampian police shelved the investigation in 1980, but it remained open. By this time, around 3,000 people had been interviewed. Dr. Page's ex-husband ended up leaving the country, and it's believed that by the mid-1990s he was working as a researcher at the University of Leiden. He held on to the Mile End Place property for some time, but eventually sold it. He never had any contact with the Page family following his divorce. In 2015, following a review, the case was reopened. Detective Superintendent Malcolm Stewart led the investigation after the Lord Advocate Frank Mulholland said he'd like it to be reinvestigated. With advances in forensic techniques, it was hoped that finally Dr. Page would get justice. On 17th March 2020, 79-year-old Christopher Harrison was formally arrested by Detective Constable Thomas Gorman for the murder of Dr. Brenda Page. A trial date was set for 22nd August 2022 at the High Court in Aberdeen. Harrison was accused of forcing his way into the Allen Street flat and repeatedly striking Dr. Page on the head and body with a blunt implement or implements on 14th July 1978. He was also accused of assaulting her on various dates between May 1972 and June 1976 in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and at various other locations. It was alleged he was violent towards her. He was also facing charges of attempting to defeat the ends of justice on 14th July 78 at an undisclosed location in Edinburgh, or on a journey between Aberdeen and the capital by disposing of a watch and a bag containing his bloodied clothing, including shoes, following the attack. David Mogach, Harrison's defence solicitor, said he'd been instructed by his client to plead not guilty to the charges. His trial finally began before Martin Richardson, Lord Richardson, on 21st February 2023 at the High Court in Aberdeen, with solicitor Brian McConaughey acting for the defence. Alex Prentice, the Advocate Depute, led the case for the Crown. Forensic pathologist Marjorie Turner told the court, having reviewed the original post-mortem, that Dr. Page had died as a result of blunt force trauma and that she'd been hit more than 20 times during the assault. She also had bruising to her hands and a dislocated finger, all pointing to defensive wounds. Her sister Rita told the court she had once told her relationship with Harrison was like walking on eggshells and that he could be unpredictable. Her friend Diane Davey also told the court via video link that she had been quite terrified of him, and another friend, Anne Lemon, stated that Dr. Page had told her that if anything happened to her in unusual circumstances, then her husband would be responsible. Mrs. Lemon also told police that Harrison had kicked the doctor out of her home, physically, leaving bruises on her legs, and she was concerned that if she went back, he'd kill her. Another friend, George Narrow, gave evidence supporting the fear that he would injure her, and she was so scared she told him to tell police that if anything happened to her and it looked like suicide, it wasn't. Eric Jensen, a retired police officer and forensic scientist, described the scene where Dr. Page was found. She'd been wearing her nightdress and was lying on the bed, her feet on the floor and her hands lying up towards her neck. Her hair was matted with blood, and she'd been hit while sitting or lying on the bed. Blood had also been discovered on the bedroom door handle and on the front door, but none was found in Harrison's car. The bedroom window had been forced open with a lever of some sort, but no other signs of forced entry were noted. It was surmised Harrison had hidden in the wardrobe in the bedroom. Throughout the trial, Harrison denied murdering Dr. Page. When arrested, he'd told police he loved her very much and claimed he'd had no involvement in her death. He also went on that he was deeply saddened by her murder and that she was a brilliant scientist. He also denied having a violent temper, although admitted to being sad that she did escort work. However, at the Allen Street flat, Harrison's semen was found on the duvet and the DNA matched his. But his solicitor tried to convince the jury that Dr. Page had made it all up so they could divorce. The jury were having none of it. 82-year-old Harrison was found guilty of murdering Dr. Page on Thursday, 9th March 2023. He was sentenced to life with a minimum period to be served of 20 years before he's eligible for parole. Harrison dropped plans to appeal his conviction in June 2023. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.